Hey there, folks. Welcome to Spectrum Pulse. We talk about music, movies, art, and culture. And today, it's a big one. You've all been waiting for it. Today, we're going to be talking about the newest album from AJR, Neotheater. All right, second time's the charm, right? But before we get into it proper, let me set the scene. Middle of July 2017, I'm churning my way through my overladen schedule, and I figure, on a lark, I'd check out this new project from a band for which I had zero expectations. Yeah, their first album had been an inflamed cyst upon the bowels of indie pop rock, but reportedly, they had left their major label to deliver this themselves, which was a facade easy enough to blow through when you consider the connections they had, and the copyright claims they leveled, and any access to proper Billboard or RIAA documentation, but I respect the persistence to hold up the illusion and call me a liar directly for pointing that out. But you know what? I'm getting ahead of the story. It's not about me, because at that point, while I had zero expectations the album would be good, it couldn't be that bad, right? Well, you all know the story. I took in that album, and despite being quite ill at the time, speak of the devil right now, I got in front of the camera and gave it the thorough flensing it deserved as an incoherent fusion of genres and malformed ideas that was still screamingly convinced of its own transcendent power. To this day, it is the worst album I have ever reviewed on this channel. And I say that more because there's a part of me that's still faintly sickened by the pastel-shaded cum shot wrought upon the tears of an evangelical youth group taking their first hits of a bad joint laced with PCP. And while one can recoil in absolute revulsion from the sound on display, what I took the strongest umbrage with was how it was a complete thematic failure. Sure, the lyrics might be overstuffed and drooling over with dunderheaded pop culture references that fostered a lingering suspicion that the trio was more brand deal than band, but at the core, it was an attempt to complete similar arcs to what 21 Pilots did with Blurryface, or John Bellion did with The Human Condition, and examining the arc of their success, taking the novel approach to avoid owning any real drama by making the mother of bad faith decisions to wallow in overprivileged non-action. That's what made the project feel so hideously wrong to me, clearly deluded into believing that there's dramatic impact through their framing and delivery, and then delivering somehow the antithesis of all of it. It'd be worthy of Dadaist horror if there was any trace of subversive thrill instead of glassy-eyed auto-tune scatting. That was 2017. Posted the review, and went about as viral for me as any album review is wont to do, to the point where Angel Olsen's embittered, "They made a meme out of my legacy, darling," from Alex Cameron's Stranger Kiss echoed whenever I thought about that review. That revolting thing about the acts that you lambast in the era of internet content creation. Because in addition to their somehow real fan base, they may have even picked up waves of infamy thanks mostly to yours truly and critics like me panning that album. And thus, in the only way they'd understand when they see this review, a pop culture reference, I thought of the Joker near the end of The Dark Knight and the line, "I think you and I are destined to do this forever." And so we've got Neotheater, reportedly a little bit better and a little bit darker from the trio, and with no obvious featuring credits to jeopardize the illusion that they aren't managed or distributed through the major label system. But considering you all wanted me to cover it, what did we get? Well, you know what? If you're all here to watch me do an overblown, over-literate evisceration of this thing, look, that's for special occasions. And AJR's Neotheater, despite its lofty swells that want to feel cribbed from a mid-50s live-action Disney musical, it's really not that special. It's certainly not the special sort of excruciating that made The Click such a uniquely atrocious album. Now, this is still absolutely terrible, let's not dance around that, but for the first time, I can hear points where the group has at least the potential to make songs that would be vaguely tolerable, or maybe an artistic instinct that isn't the equivalent of a spring-loaded meat tenderizer to the gonads. Or, let's put it another way, I'm not even sure this is the worst album I've heard this year. And for AJR, to say all that, it's an improvement. But to qualify that low bar, we still need to qualify why this album is as abysmal as you would expect. So let's run through the gauntlet. First off, this is a trio that seems to understand grooves as something that Bruce Campbell might say, rather than any sort of well-structured organic percussion or coherent bass line. And even then, I'm not sure they would get that reference, because AJR remain one of the most sanitized acts utterly devoid of texture and flavor making indie pop. And yet, they're still content to nakedly rip off off John Bellion's circa 2016's genre fusion and production style. The overweight programmed percussion with no body, the pitch-shifted vocals, an odd obsession with whitewashed 50s Americana rooted more in Disney, a flailing and embarrassing attempt to co-opt some hip-hop patterns in the mainstream, and yet while missing any sense of subtlety and gravitas. And what's so pitiful at this point is that they so desperately want to make their songs sound so big and epic and important in order to crank up to match the emotionality, move the stakes up to 11, selling it all with complete sincerity, and yet none of it sticks because frontman Jack Med has the bemused non-presence of somebody who is hopelessly out of his depth and is trying to play for a cheap pop rather than add any sort of deeper flavor and dimensionality or poise. He's got much of the same problem as Lil Dicky has in terms of his instantly dislikable anti-charisma, a complete inability to project confidence or dignity in his writing or delivery, especially with that ear-scraping falsetto, along with the refusal to truly confront might be the ugly roots of any emotions driving any of these songs and material, half because of a complete lack of visceral intensity in the delivery, but half because the writing defaults to the shallowest possible turns of phrase. That's one reason why it's so easy to consider AJR a parody or a joke, just with no punchline, or for me, why it's so easy to see them as a corporate calculation gone awry, especially when the band actively tries to diminish the stakes of their own material, which again was one of the biggest issues underlying the click. Because you know what? For Neotheater, let me give them the slightest amount of credit. Reflections upon childhood and adolescence and a fear of growing up, that is worthwhile material to write a song or even an album about. There can be gravitas and weight in that, even if it really just serves as subtext behind the larger text of AJR's terror of actually releasing new art. Because once again, just like on the click, AJR's muse is their own creative process, which can be a real problem when you have a band whose privilege and their own seemingly willful blindness to it stands as the most glaring, unintentional subtext to the whole affair. And yet when you pair that myopia with big statements to make big statements, statements that feel devoid of substance or critical self-awareness, we will get to that, but it just rapidly makes them seem really cloying and plastic and kind of insufferable. Take the song Birthday Party, a song that on the surface would seem to have a child making a bunch of naive statements on their very first minute in the world about how everything is going to be okay and all right, echoed on the hook with the statements that he's got his and life is going to be a cinch and that's just how it is. Now, the intended joke here is that all this is bullshit and that there is a darker side to all of it and that naivete is inevitably going to be shattered, but on the bridge we get a sample from Eraserhead that reflects the same point rather than subverting it, and we never get a moment where the illusion is shattered or challenged, or even a note of aspirational hope that's provided that things might change to reflect that naivete. So the entire song winds up feeling really detached and smarmy. And that same detachment, it informs songs like 100 Bad Days, where sure, bad experiences make for good stories. But when the punchline is that would make them interesting at parties? Well, first off, it depends how those stories are told to make them truly interesting. But if that's the worst to which your 100 Bad Days add up, kind of destroys any sense of tension, and it actively gets worse on Break My Face, where not only I could swear that a certain Cave Johnson took a similar conceit and made it a million times more potent in Portal 2, but also has this patronizing pettiness directed at people who might run their mouth or roll their eyes at AJR, and reinforces that same myopia, that same self-obsession. And you would think a song like Karma would get interesting, or start to punch a hole in that insularity. It's all going well now, and yet he's still not happy in his mock therapy session. And well, I could say that's all because the hollow self-absorption isn't getting to the core of the real issues, and altruism really should be for its own sake, not to make you happy. But the album unintentionally provides a matching explanation. First in the song where he again tries to avoid facing reality by asking to stay in therapy forever, and then followed right next by a song called Beats. We get a track that might as well serve as an ad for Beats by Dre, as he considers, and then becomes through the art, just another corporate shill, as I called it all along. And again, the band isn't even really commenting on it, or even criticizing it. It's just their experience. It's how things are for them now. And given how actively passive they are in their own stories, it only highlights how nakedly cynical and weightless this entire enterprise is. And this is probably the point of the review where I could branch into a lengthy video essay surrounding AJR as the unintentional poster child of white, overprivileged, late-period capitalism. I really don't have to. because the band themselves highlight their own disposability on the entertainments here, where the songs become alarms to be worn out, the food quenches the boredom, and you don't dare contemplate something bigger when there's more mindless flash and consumption to do. Hell, the hook of the song is literally about turning off your brain when the entertainment arrives, and that highlights the sharpest dichotomy of this album. Again, for as much as it wants to spur some soaring drama, challenge the human spirit in its choice of tones and sound, the content will then reframe and gut all of it of its power by making it all self-reinforcing and utterly unwilling to challenge anything about himself or anything else, bastardized by the language, dumbing it down to the lowest common denominator. That's one big reason why the common bond found on Wow, I'm Not Crazy feels so empty, because outside of his WebMD diagnosed hypochondria, there's nothing on this album that feels genuinely crazy that would earn that relief. That's why Dear Winter, while trying for sweetness for a future child where he hasn't even met the mother yet, it winds up reinforcing its own emptiness. It's a song about nothing. Put this opposite, say, Dear Theodosia from Hamilton, AJR can't even come close to making this sort of concept work. And it's ultimately why the finale tries to highlight an arc where he gave them hell, and he didn't, and how overwhelmed by an outpouring of support he gets from his fans. But again, it's not earned. There's no arc here. There's nothing that was lost or challenged or any serious revelations found, just a reinforcement of their status quo. A bad year might have been implied a few times, but brushed aside by pablum or outright contradicted on Karma to reinforce the product, straining to mean so much more than it actually does, with the only emotive note coming through as the response from the fans who bought into the shallow affair. And if you don't buy into it, mostly on my part thanks to bad mixing where the grooves are constantly underweight, the percussion has more texture than body, the horns sound thin, the arranged elements are garish and overplayed, and let's not forget every shrill squeal and howl from the teased vocals and the mono-genre pile-up. No, this is just excruciating. But I did say there were improvements on this project. Somewhere, in between songs like Birthday Party, where the garbled Donald Duck voice on the pre-chorus, or the horrible layering of the trumpet off the pianos and vocals on Break My Face, or the bastardization of a vaudeville style with the garish horns on the entertainments here, or how the genuinely promising gallop off the cello of Karma is handicapped by grainy and gummy squawks and mutilated samples, or the gutless contorted glitch of beats, or the drop on Wow, I'm Not Crazy that's trying to do a Chainsmokers thing and failing. And you know what, the last one? It's kind of exasperating because outside of the larger context of the album, and even with the really stupid verses, it's not relevant to anything. You took your goddamn vitamins, why do we care? The melody of the hook isn't bad, at least not there. Same with, and I can't believe I'm gonna say this, Don't Throw Up My Legos. I mean, the multi-part hook has some structure. The chopping of this sample, it's a pale imitation of what John Bellion does, but it's closer than anything else here to actually kind of making it work. And the sentiment of trying to hold on to childhood while growing up, it's got potential, even if it is badly executed. And while I'm kind of cynical looking at Dear Winter, I can at least see outside of the context of the album how it might seem kind of charming with its clumsy amateurishness. But it's the one ballad on this album where I do see a bit of genuine potential. Turning Out Part 2. Yes, this is a sequel to that awful goddamn breakup song on the Click where they said, I grew up on Disney, but this don't feel like Disney. And there's still some of that same magnanimous air that I hate in this sort of breakup song. But there is some truth in falling for the idea of someone and convincing yourself it could work rather than face reality. And it's one of the few moments where the self-awareness actually seems a little genuine. More to the point, it's being sung by Ryan Met, the brother of the frontman Jack Met, who you probably don't recognize without the layers of auto-tune from singing Call My Dad on the Click. And I'll say it, I'd easily prefer Ryan Met take more of the frontman role than Jack. There's a similar vocal timbre, but it's heavier, a little rougher, and it carries the emotion of the song way more convincingly. Hell, that raises the question why AJR don't bother to write more developed vocal arrangements with some real harmonies instead of just piling on the pitch-shifted overdubs and falsetto. I mean, I'm not saying it would be all the way better, but if I'm looking for points where the hooks have the most potential, I mean, like Don't Throw Up My Legos, maybe Sober Up off the Click, I think it could connect. There's points where I can see where it might work. But look, I think a bunch of you were coming into this review expecting all sorts of profanity, all manner of flowery language to rip this album a new one. A lengthy, sober analysis is probably not what you wanted, and yeah, I accept that. And let's not excuse that this is still a pretty atrocious album. The writing is cloying and juvenile with no real attempt at wit or charm. Jack Met remains one of the most punchable frontmen in music, with the delivery that embodies everything I despise about this set of corporate-approved indie pop. The thematic arc, it finds new ways to astound me in its ineptitude with every re-listen, and if John Bellion isn't suing for royalties, he probably should be. I don't just dislike this album, I thoroughly hate the environment in which it has found fans and success. Too shallow for truly cutting irony or deconstruction, and too privileged and cowardly to bother taking any sort of risk, but too overblown and oversaturated to be easily ignored, and insufferably convinced of its own earnest swell without any real soul or dignity in order to back it up. But you know what? There's enough of an inkling of better taste and poise, some shreds of some okay ideas, puts it above the click, which is truly a horror to behold in finding new ways to appall the audience. And with no auto-tune scatting this time around, yeah, strong 2 out of 10. And if you think I'm recommending this album at this point, yeah, not a chance in hell. Still, it's an improvement from an offense to everything good in the world to just fucking terrible. Maybe in a decade AJR might make a passable album or something. Presuming, of course, that Neotheater hasn't been burned to the ground. And honestly, good riddance. So yeah, thanks a lot for watching. If you'd like to like and subscribe, I'd be more than grateful. I can imagine a lot of you guys are expecting me to be a lot angrier. I'm not, really. AJR is gonna do their thing, I'm gonna do mine. It's terrible fucking music, but I can't get that much astounded by this. It doesn't surprise me in the same way, and honestly I don't think it was trying to surprise me in the same way, which might actually made it a little better as a result. And again, there are occasionally a few ideas I can see the benefit of. But hey, if you want to buy or stream it, links down there below. Actually, I probably won't put links down there below because nobody should hear this, but well, we'll see. And I got the poll up there for all you AJR fans. Tell me how wrong I am. Although again, really don't think I am, especially with everything I brought up in the lyrics. Like to see you defend that. But hey, anything else I might be able to do to improve my presentation, I'm all ears. Still a little bit sick, if you can't tell. My throat's kind of raspy, still kind of stuffed up, but hey, you make do. And hey, just a friendly reminder to everyone who keeps asking about Billboard Breakdown. It's on a new channel. Link to the new channel is in the card right here. Please go over and subscribe. The videos are still going up as normal. Until next time, I'm Mark. You're watching Spectrum Pulse. And I'll see you next time.